Hello, everyone. This is Jen Robinson, your professor for art appreciation. And this is the first of your lectures online for the class. This is chapter 1, The Power of Art. Now, I post these, what I call micro lectures, basically as a way for you to have a similar experience to the ones that students have in the in-person classroom. So these lectures that you're going to be watching, they follow the same type of format that I'd be presenting to the in-person class. These should be used in conjunction with your readings. You'll notice that you have your chapter quizzes, and those will pull from this material and from your textbook reading. So you should be watching these, listening to these, I guess is the better expression, and reading your chapters. But I post these so you have a sense of what we discuss in the class, and it complements that experiences. And it gives you a little bit more of an in-depth understanding of the way I would approach the class when being in a physical classroom. So I am going to set these up as what I call micro lectures. So they were going to be around 5 to 10 minutes on a topic, typically no longer than that. You should watch them in order, but because they're micro lectures, it gives an easier way for students to go back and review material. So you're not trying to look through a 45-minute, YouTube video trying to find one little thing. So I will title them by topic. For instance, this first micro lecture will be about the idea of what art is. So again, hopefully you can refer to them easily when you're looking for them in the course. So this first chapter, The Power of Art, I'd say the first question to ask is, what is art? What is art anyway? And this is a question that has baffled and intrigued and confused people, I'd say, for hundreds of years. So I'm not going to pretend like I can explain it any better than sages and philosophers throughout the years have. I think I'm one of those people who thinks art is sort of anything you say it is. I'm very flexible in my belief of what art is. But I'm going to give you the more traditional definition as well. Art comes from the Latin word ars, and it literally refers to skill, which you'll see sets up a certain kind of dynamic about what art is. If it's only skilled people, then that gives a certain kind of impression, which not all artists are what we'd call technically skilled in the formal sense. So right there, I'd say that blows up, this sort of idea as well. There's really 3 different types of art that we're going to look at as being sort of categories of art. They are the first that you see here, fine art, the second, applied art, and then the third, folk art. Now, fine art is probably the one you have the most experience with. If you've gone to a museum or you've gone to an arts fair or something of that kind, been in someone's house and saw a painting on the wall, this is what you would come into contact with and probably think of it as being art. And I gave you just 2 examples here, a painting, let's say, or a sculpture. So fine art, we say, it is about technical skill or technical training. If you're an art student right now taking classes at the college, you are trying to become a fine artist. You are taking, let's say, color theory or, painting 1. You're learning to draft. You're learning to think about composition. You're, learning color combinations and the color wheel and such. So you're undergoing what we call formal technical training. We say that those are fine artists. We also find that fine artists typically make unique objects. Not always, because there's some things like printmaking, which makes multiples, but it's typically about uniqueness. The second category, applied art, is a bit different because it is creating things that are more about function and utility, I'd say. And it's creating things that are about, application and repetition. You're designing something so it can be repeated perhaps many, many times. And again, these are often more usable objects. So you'll notice I gave the examples of architecture and design. Architecture, it's a usable thing. You go inside a building for shelter, but it also can be designed to be aesthetic, as we say, or pleasing to the eye. So it kind of straddles this interesting boundary about what art is. And then let's say design. Let's just think, for instance, graphic design. It takes talent, it takes technical skill, but it's a different kind of skill than we would say perhaps is used in the first category. So you're trying to create something that can be repeated. Let's say advertising imagery, right? So we'd say that's more applied art. The last category is folk art. This is typically art that is self-taught. And so the artist has not had formal technical training. And if we go to the next slide, you'll notice I gave you some examples of the three categories. Folk art, if you look at the folk art, this is actually Grandma Moses, who is discussed in depth in your chapter. So make sure you read about good old Grandma Moses. And she had no technical training. She didn't go to art school. She just liked to paint. So she painted the world around her, the people that she saw, the communities that she interacted with. And, I always say to people, her art's pretty intriguing. So, when people talk about good art, bad art, I'm like, folk artists can be just as quote unquote good as trained fine artists. And the fine artist you're seeing here is Matisse, who did go to art school and did get a formal training. And then on the bottom, you have the applied art example, which are these nesting tables. They nest in on themselves. And you'll notice that they're aesthetically pleasing. They use the primary colors in an interesting kind of way. But they are something that was designed to be repeated as an object that's applied, let's say, to a certain situation. Home design, right? So it might be a very pleasing object, but again, it'd be considered more applied art because it's functionality. So again, that's something to consider there. So these are